I'm gonna be honest, these ones are hard to read. Stay safe out there. The road trip. Mardi Gras was the one party I wanted to go to since I was a little child. I remember looking at the colors, the necklaces, the dancing, the music, and the parades that were on TV. The whole thing was haunting me. I wanted to experience it all. Somehow that year the planets aligned, and my friends and I, the 5 of us, got into my car for a road trip to New Orleans. We were old enough to drive there and young enough to lose ourselves to the music. So there we were, dancing on the seats and singing all the hits on the radio on our way there. The party started way before we even made it to the city. Upon arrival, we went to the hotel and just left everything in our room. The 5 of us made it out without knowing only 4 would make it back that night. Nothing could have prepared us for what was coming. We were pumped, eager, ready, but unaware danger could hide in any alley leading to Bourbon Street. We had brought enough bottles to get a pack of elephants drunk. The team was formed by 2 girls and 3 boys. We were all friends. As we made it downstairs, the party was already a pandemonium of colors, laughter, music, and dancing. The booze flowed from every direction, and I started to have blurry vision very soon after. You probably know the feeling, being clumsy, the mouth not responding correctly, the giggle multiplying, and the eyes lost in the madness of the party. Suddenly, my friend Florence came to me and said, "Hey, I think those cute guys over there are looking at us." I looked in the direction she pointed at, and indeed, a group of guys was dancing and looking our way. They were all big, very good looking. My mind was just too drowned in alcohol to make any conscious decisions. My friend Morty came along and said to Florence, "Hey girls, those guys are scouting you. Do you want us to split?" I looked at him but was unable to say a word. Florence said to him that it was best that they dance across the street, but stayed close. They moved and the guys approached us. I was dancing and honestly having the time of my life, so I paid very little attention to the whole thing. I was getting drunk too. The bottle I was holding in my hand began to seem heavy, so I gave it to these guys to share a drink. That was the first thing I noticed. They weren't drinking. None of them even had a bottle. Mardi Gras? That was odd. There were 5 of them and only 2 of us. Florence got pretty close with a short guy with a beard and glasses. To my drunken eyes, he was the Mardi Gras version of Jude Law. When I saw him again in the round of recognition in the sheriff's office, though, he looked nothing like Jude Law. He was closer to a crooked version of Willem Dafoe. They got it off, and soon Florence was looking at me with a huge smile. They kissed and kept on dancing. One of the guy's friends came over to me and started talking into my ear. But I was just too drunk to reply, and he ended the conversation briefly after. I don't know how long it went by, but I drifted away into the sea of people and suddenly lost everyone, Florence, Marty, and the rest of our crew. I pulled up my phone and texted Florence saying, "Hey Flo, where are you?" Did the same with Morty. The problem was the crowd was too huge and we had no signal. I stopped drinking. I needed to find my friends. As I moved along with the crowd, I got a glimpse of Florence, who was still surrounded by the same group of guys. I made my way and held her hand from afar. She grabbed onto it and whispered to my ear, "Get me out of here. This guy's a creep and his friends are touching me. Get Morty and get the others." I held onto her grip, but the crowd was still moving and I lost her again. The night was falling. The crowd was growing. I tried to find the guys. When I finally spotted Morty, he was dancing with a group of girls and the rest of our friends. I got closer and Morty looked at me with a drunken smile. They were almost wasted. The girls dancing with them kissed each other and flashed everyone, trying to get free drinks. The whole thing looked like a scene out of the Roman Empire. Everyone was making out with everyone, and suddenly, out of nowhere, Morty reached out and kissed me. I held him by the shoulders and said, "Morty, I lost Flo to the group of guys. She said she's in danger. We gotta look for her. Come on, you have to help me. Wake up." His big smile reduced to sealed lips, and he looked at me again, as if it was the first time he'd seen me that day. He raised his eyebrows and said, "Say that again slowly, please." I repeated every word. We initiated our search for Florence. Fortunately, she was nowhere to be found. We stayed on the streets until the last drunken person left on all 4s, but there wasn't even a trace of Flo. We went back to the hotel in case she had returned, but she wasn't there either, so we decided to go to the police. There was a line to the booth to report missing persons. All of the uniformed people in the office were busy and we had to wait. When it was finally our turn, the officer didn't pay too much attention to us. He asked if we'd been drinking or doing drugs. We were honest. We said yes, and he replied that surely she was drunk and somewhere and that she would show up by the morning. Thanks a lot, guys. We were furious. We left and looked for Flo in every alley on our way to the hotel. Just before we reached the door, in the last alley we visited, we found her, barely dressed, lying against the wall. Her hair and makeup were a mess. She looked unconscious. We got her up and dragged her to the hotel. I had to put her under the shower and clean her up before she could tell us what happened. She was crying her heart out, but managed to tell us that the guys she was dancing with did some terrible things. We went back to the police and did our best to have them apprehended. After the recognition round and a waterfall of tears, we left. Flo was called to testify in court twice about half a year later. What Flo went through had a big impact on her life when we got back home. She spent 5 months in a depression, but started counseling and slowly began a major transformation. She learned about post-traumatic stress, processed what happened, and started changing other parts of her life. She went into the counseling field herself, changing careers from her work in finance. She was always a strong woman, but I had no idea she was capable of turning tragedy into that much beauty. She called it post-traumatic growth. Years later, I watched her attract a man very different from what used to be her type, eventually having 2 beautiful twins together that are the light of her life. These days, it's rare to see her without that big iconic smile all over her face. Oh, and as for Morty and I, well, that didn't exactly work out. And it was very sad in its own way. But that's a different and much longer story. Dazed and confused. There is no bigger party on the face of the earth than the Carnival in Brazil. I know this because I've been there myself, dancing as if my life depended on it with thousands of people. The amplified beat of the drums makes your body move whether you want it or not. And I wanted to. I really did. But I didn't know my dream was to become a nightmare. I was just moving my body frantically and enjoying salsa at its best. My life was going to depend on my body's skills before the day ended. I had saved up for 2 years for that trip, and it went according to plan until reality took over and swallowed everything I had in mind. It's amazing and disturbing how things can go so bad so fast. I was in Salvador do Bahia, the town where the Carnival was born. That morning, as I made it out of the hostel, I saw the owner being dressed by his wife, who also did his makeup. They were both in their 70s, and I thought to myself, that's the kind of love I want to find. I'm still a hopeless dreamer trying to find a soulmate, but that journey was a one-way ticket to how sick humanity can be. As I was saying, I made it out at 10 a.m. after the included breakfast. I was wearing a t-shirt that said Dazed and Confused and a very tight pair of denim shorts. Now, I'm nowhere near having a Brazilian body full of vertiginous curves and generous attributes, but I felt cute. I was in a party mood, smiling at the sun above my head. I made my way all the way downtown and admired the costumes and the colors of the parade. There were dancers, singers, drums, and, if there's such a thing as the scent of joy, it was definitely in the air that day. Bahianos, local people, were also out for the party of the year. So, I was surrounded by dancers from around the world in this ancient ritual of moving your hips to the banging of the drums. The morning went by and so did the afternoon. I was already a little tipsy from the cheap beer I was drinking to cool off, or at least try to. The mix of dancing and tropical weather is a hot and thirsty one, believe me. I was dancing, sweaty, covered in glitter, half drunk and wearing a big smile. I watched the sun fall into the ocean from afar as the night came along with more colors, some light shows, and more dancing. That's when I first noticed his presence. He was tall, with brown eyes, brunette hair, a deep tan, and the body of a David. It was dancing 2 people away, but constantly staring. I just couldn't erase that morning image, and in my head, I could see us already coming out of our white home in its magic town to dance the day away. I tried moving toward him, smiling and making contact. Our skins touched, and we were both beyond sweaty. He smiled at me, and we started dancing together. It was as if the entire world around me, full of colors and fun, was somehow summed up in his piercing brown eyes. The dancing was amazing for the first half an hour. Then he grabbed me and went behind me to perform some kind of salsa move that was almost pornographic. We hadn't spoken a word yet. I gave up resistance, gasping at his touch. The next 15 minutes were a blurred and sweaty embrace, locked together in timeless tension. I felt the blush of blood flow in more than my cheeks. My arousal grew as I struggled to resist ripping his shirt off right there on the floor. He got his mouth close to my ear and said, "Raul." I turned around and said, "Kimberly." Those were the only words we exchanged before he grabbed my hand and took me away from the crowd to a less crowded spot. There were thousands of people around us, but he managed to find a clear corner. He grabbed my waist and kissed me. He was somewhat rough, but I thought it was all part of that virility oozing from every pore. And that's exactly when things started going off rail. He grabbed my cheeks with his big hand and literally ate my mouth again. He smelled like alcohol, but so did I. I was a little drunk and wanted to be treated like a lady, though, nonetheless. He got me closer and put his big hands inside my shorts, looking for my intimate parts. I smiled and took his hand away and said, "Not so fast, Raul. Please, be tender." I don't think he spoke any English, though. He repeated the same thing 3 times before I slapped him in the face and screamed, "No!" He laughed at me and watched me leave through the crowd. I looked over my shoulder to see if he was following me, but he wasn't. Half an hour later, I felt a pair of hands going beneath my shirt, looking for my breasts from behind me. I looked back and it was Raul again. I screamed, but my shouting was muffled by the crowd, so I pushed him away and left for a different spot. I got paranoid. Things were getting completely out of hand. I knew I was alone, half drunk, and being chased by this big guy who was scorching hot, but beyond rude as an understatement. He wouldn't take no for an answer. Suddenly, I realized just how much danger I was in. What was he going to do next? All the alcohol in my blood suddenly evaporated and I looked around me. I didn't know a single face. Everybody was already half naked and dancing while drinking and screaming. It all felt so menacing I felt powerless, dropped on my knees and just started crying. After a few minutes, I gathered enough strength to get up and go back to the hostel to look for shelter. I started walking, and the moment I stepped out of the crowd, I turned around to see Raul walking behind me. I just ran. I didn't care what people thought, I just ran. He picked up his pace and started coming closer and closer. I had to go several more blocks before getting to the hostel, so I ran faster than ever before. In my mind, I was running for my integrity, and for my safety, I was running for my life. Raul shouted my name and ran after me. I looked over my shoulder, lost my balance, and fell to the floor. My shirt was stained with dirty street water, a mix of beer, glitter, and sewage. I got up in the nick of time, and before he could put his hands over me, and by the time I made it to the hostel, I closed the door in his face. But that wasn't all I did. Oh no. No man can put his hands on me like that and not get what he deserves. I gathered my courage. I opened up the door right after closing it and saw Raul's smile, as if I was giving in to him. But I had a different plan. Smiling at him, my right hand gathered the small but heavy lamp on the table next to the door. As he walked in and went to touch me, I swung as hard as I could with my right hand, connecting the ceramic to his head, watching him stunned fall to the floor with a line of blood moving down his head all the way to his lips. Minutes later, the police arrived and took him away. My dream of a little white house by the ocean with the handsome Brazilian man shattered and fell to pieces. I went into the shower, crying, feeling his hands on my body, touching me, grabbing me. I felt dirty, overpowered, and sad. The following day, though, I met a nice group of people during breakfast at the hostel and stayed with them the entire week. One of the women in the group had gone through something similar, and we'd spent time walking on the beach together, crying, and hearing each other's stories. Raul's face kept showing up in the crowd, coming close, saying my name, but we were a group of 10, and it was easy to block out that energy. Strength in numbers. I've definitely rethought traveling alone. The little white house by the ocean dream might be shattered, but nobody was going to ruin the carnival for me. Not even you, Raul. The pink teddy bear. My brother was 8, and I was 5 at the time this happened. It's not a story I can entirely remember, of course, but piecing what he told me a million times, and my limited memories, I can tell it to you now today. There was a circus in town. It was the summer, a very hot summer in Fredericksburg, Texas, over 90 degrees. We all went to see the attractions as a family. There was a big fair outside the circus grounds, complete with a popcorn machine and games to play between shows. My strongest memories are feelings. I remember the excitement, the happiness, the joy, but also the terror of not seeing my family anywhere around me. The one image I have printed in my head, and I can recall every time I close my eyes, is that man holding my tiny hand and dragging me away from the stalls. The man's pink t-shirt and scarce hair as I looked up are a nightmare I'm happy to have survived. But before that horrifying thing happened, we were having a great time as a family, going from stall to stall, playing games, eating sweets, and making jokes. My dad has always been an easygoing man who loves to crack a joke every time he can. That's exactly what we were doing under the fair lights, playing whack-a-mole, balloon darts, and ring tossing. My brother tells me I was fixated on a big pink teddy bear that was in the ring toss game. I was asking my dad to win it for me. He was spending his money trying his best to do it, but unfortunately failing. He ran out of cash and decided to go to the ATM to get more. My mom stayed with us, but she was trying to calm him because he wanted a miniature-sized tank that was over at the balloon dart stall. We all went there. I was still thinking of the teddy bear, so I ran off alone, leaving my mom and my brother playing. When I got to the ring toss stall, my dad wasn't there, and I turned around to see my mom, but couldn't find her anywhere. I got scared right away and felt tears come down my cheeks. Suddenly, this half-bald man crouched and told me, "What are you doing here all by yourself? Oh, don't cry, dear. Where are Mom and Dad?" He looked nice and smiled at me. I replied I wanted the teddy bear behind him. He said, "If you're a good girl and come with me, I'll give you that teddy bear, but you must do as I say and come with me." I walked with him behind the stalls. He crouched again, moved the hair away from my face with his index finger, swept the tear with his thumb and said, "You're such a pretty girl. Am I lucky to have found you or what? How old are you, sugar?" I replied that I was 5, smiling, grateful for his presence, extending my entire hand to show him how many fingers 5 years were. He smiled back and said, "Okay, we don't have much time, so you have to do exactly as I say to win that big teddy bear." I had a lace holding my hair, matching the color of the lace in my dress. I remember looking at it before looking over the man's shoulder and seeing my mom and dad looking for me everywhere. He looked down, and I took my chance and I ran out to hug my mom. She asked me where I'd been, and when I told her the whole story, we went to talk to the cops. I remember crying because I thought I was losing my chance to get the teddy bear. Meanwhile, the police found the guy, pants to his knees with my lace in his hands. I'm not happy about how close I came to danger, but it does comfort me that because of what I went through, there's one less evil bastard wandering the world.